Delivery, Jack.
Actually, it's not Jack. It's...
Dishes. Dishes from the think pool. That's you, right?
Oh, that's kind of right. I'm...
Sign, please. Here you go.
Oh, a package joke. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Knowledge Pool, a think tank of games and magic. After my Theros Mechanics video, I had the good fortune in running into a new friend who subscribed on Twitch, who gave me some input on the channel. They said they'd like to see something a little more long form from me. The jokes are fine, but some topics are easier to condense than others, and editing takes a long time. As such, it's hard for me to bring my worldview and knowledge into some of the heavier thought bombs of magic. It's that conversation that led me to this segment. Welcome to Deep Dives. In this series, we're likely to go much deeper than a regular preview or review. This video is likely to be longer, with less jump cuts and jokes, letting the topic speak for itself. This is a work in progress, so I'd like you to tell me what you think of it in the comments below. Your feedback absolutely affects the way this channel is run, and thank you, my friend, for giving your feedback and giving us the first idea for a topic for this segment. I was actually given two interesting topics by our anonymous friend. One was packages, what they are, how they help with deck building, etc. The other was the secret behind Core 20's elementals and how they became a viable archetype practically overnight. But I believe the former answers the latter once we explore it a little bit. But first, some definitions. A package in these terms refers to a suite of cards that have a specific focus or theme. Magic enjoys dealing in themes and sub-themes, as they are easy to contextualize lore-wise in their vast world building, and they allow for creating a restricted but creative deck building concept, with just enough, or at times not enough cards, to make an archetype of their own, planting seeds for decks to come into fruition later. There's also an upside in Limited, where decks are smaller, a package can create a pathway for sealed and draft players to build based upon the cards they got. A friend of mine asked me to explain the difference to him between a package and a pile of cards. For instance, if he were to put a bunch of big green dummies together with a card like Thorn Mammoth, would that be a package? My answer of yes but no seemed to confuse him. I told him while there is synergy in what he's doing and that they technically create a win condition, they don't really facilitate a win, and thus aren't really a package. But in that deck, you might run a ramp package, cards that work to get your mana high enough to cast those dummies, or a removal suite to give yourself answers to blockers. The nuance of the idea escaped him, and I have to admit I struggled in explaining it to my full potential. I'll try to make it clear here, but know that if you don't get this by the end, that's okay. Not everyone will. The paths of packages vary in their execution. One way to make a package is to lump cards together under a specific keyword. Almost every set has set-specific keywords, which are usually synergistic within themselves. In the most recent Ravnica block, Dimir got a keyword, Surveil, which gives you a scry-like ability that feeds your graveyard. The packages given to them within the set features cards that surveil and cards that benefit from the times you surveil. If you've played Life Gain in the past, you'll recognize the synergy. Another accent to this package was a few recursion cards, self-mill, and mill matters cards, to make the potential constructed version of the deck even stronger. Players managed to use this effectively in Limited and Constructed, bringing a slightly powerful and always annoying Dimir Bond deck into being. A hasty Drakuseth hurts a lot, but is a perfect addition to the packages laid out. Tried and True Flyers is another example of a suite that often just builds itself. See Azorius flyers in M20. Other recent additions to keyword packages include Escape, Constellation, and Explore, each with their own identity and bonuses. While most packages are created by WotC within a set, sometimes cards are put together by the player, a package built across sets to create the synergies people want. While researching packages for this topic, I ran into a string of Reddit subthreads asking each other for Sunforger packages, land suites for particular decks, advice on sub-themes for cubes, and all manner of setups to create deck synergies they wanted. Packages were passed back and forth, augmented, evolved, stirring old and new cards into a harmonic whole. As I explored with Historic, I first tried my hand at Pauper and found the Kiln Fiend deck to be fun, if a little inconsistent. The cantrips and damage spells you use in the Pauper version carry over almost exactly into Artisan, with the exception of adding Wizard's Lightning. A very similar package filtered up to regular Historic, though the creature synergy changed dramatically due to better beaters at the rare and mythic level. This shows how powerful and useful a package can be when used effectively. Creating packages is also a good way to connect with the community. You never know where the next big neck deck will come from, but with importance of deck synergy, you can bet packages will be there. Another form of packages sits in the idea of tribal sets. Like keywords, but focusing on a specific supertype or subtype. You might hear words like Enchantments Matter, which is a card set that synergizes with a lot of enchantments on board. Tribal usually refers to a subtype of creature, and the cards built to work with them. Vampires were my favorite tribe growing up, and in my younger Magic career, vampires could tap other vampires to steal your opponent's creatures, and I always enjoyed bolstering my ranks with their creatures. Just like with keyword packages, cards are not just the tribe themselves, but cards that do something to generate that tribe or gain effects when that tribe is played. The most famous tribe in Magic is likely Goblins, who have cards like Goblin Grenade, Goblin Matriarch, Krenko, and Goblin Gathering in its long and illustrative set of packages. Tribes tend to have a sub-theme within them. Small, hasty creatures to get in with, large, lumbering things that take a while to get in, or even things that grow and protect each other, like elves. It's in this package grouping that lies the question of Core Set 2020's Elementals. Set mainly in Teamer, Elementals in M20 featured few small builders, accented at the top with the Elemental Night Cycle, Yarok the Desecrated, and Omnath Locus of the Royal. We'll talk more about the deck types built through these later when we talk about its success, but for now we'll consider its limited capabilities. Drafting Elementals gave you a lot of leeway on color limitation while still maintaining a main synergy that functioned well. An early Omnath gave you a roadmap for what was a good draft, solidifying a color base while giving you plenty of good picks to choose from. Most of the Elementals have Enter the Battlefield effects, which for most players feels like getting a sorcery and a creature for one efficient cost. This package has draw and some major mana ramp, making it a joy to play with in Limited. So, now that we've laid down the groundwork, we can return to the topic of constructed M20 Elementals. There are two major decks that came out of this tribe, each having a similar endgame and relying on a non-elemental to finish the job. The less powerful but more devastating win came from the Yarok deck. Yarok makes each Enter the Battlefield effect you play happen in additional time. Paired with Risen Reef, it spams Enter the Battlefield effects to keep the hand and board full, and uses Agent of Treachery to steal key pieces of its opponent's field, then swings in for lethal if the opponent doesn't concede first. Risen Reef with Yarok is an example of a value engine, or engine for short. Engines are cards or a combination of cards that create immense value like draw or ramp or some other effective value for playing the game as normal. The Enter the Battlefield package in this deck focuses on drawing cards, playing lands faster, and stifling your opponent's progress. The other deck I saw a lot is the Simic Copycat Ramp deck, which used a similar setup but with cards like Quasi-Duplicate to copy Cavalier of Thorns and Agent of Treachery. getting the extra value by having extra big creatures. This build uses mana boosters like Nissa in conjunction with Hydroid Krasis to stabilize from early aggro and draw a ridiculous amount of cards, another value engine. Both of these decks could have Jace in deck as an alternate win con with little trouble to use the better elementals to their full effect. But the question remains, how did it happen? In Magic, and card games in general, there's an idea of pushed cards. Pushed cards are cards that are borderline overpowered for their mana cost, in an effort to give a player something to build around. WotC is pushing the set, so these are pushed. Get it? Many of these cards can go too far and get banned for their contribution in a delinquent meta. See Oko and Veil. But cards like Risen Reef and Cavalier are just pushed enough to be good in their specific decks, but not hard and fast staples for a deck in their color. They need their packages in order to run effectively, and that leads brewers to find ways to abuse these powerful effects. Cards like Chandra, Acolyte of Flame also add to the synergy, with effects that work well in any deck, but the elemental effect making it particularly good for Temur or Gruul elementals. The other Chandra, Awakened Inferno, seems to have almost a detriment embedded in them for not running elementals. It's a pyroclasm effect on all non-elementals, urges you to try and use her in something with lots of elementals. The Chandra tribal deck pre-rotation was a fun and interestingly decent workaround to this problem, playing many different Chandras and using red elementals to make sure it didn't suffer from the Planeswalker's rage. So we have a bit of a formula brewing. We have 2 or 3 pushed cards in a package. We have a few things out of the package that synergize well with elementals, and we have a value engine to keep us moving through the game. But what makes it an elemental deck as opposed to a Temur agent deck or Sultai Nissa Hydra or whatever? The last thing that makes a package effective is a layer of cards that aren't good enough to play alone but work well with the synergies of the deck in question. Most people call these playables or decent. I call them fuel. These cards fill out the deck with the necessary tools to win, even if they aren't at the highest level optimal. Let's take a look at this card, Leafkin Druid. Leafkin Druid is a 0/3 that costs 2 mana and taps for green. 2 green if you control 4 or more creatures. Now, unless you're planning to block a lot of 1/1s or you think your opponent is running Shock, you'd usually be better off running Llanowar Elves or Golden Goose or Paradise Druid, which all do the same thing for cheaper or better effects for the same cost. So why run it? Because it's an elemental. Its downsides are counterbalanced in these builds, because this will trigger your Risen Reefs, fueling your engine. Glades of Paradise is a 1/2 for 1 green that gives you 2 life. Hardly anything to write home about until you put it with the 2 Yaroks on a board, 1 copied from Spark Double, allowing you to gain 6 life and get 3 shots off 1 Risen Reef enter the battlefield trigger. These not very good cards saw moderately high play in Standard for a spell, because the effectiveness of the deck was contingent on getting elementals out. Another elemental deck of sorts would be the popular Jeskai Fires of not too long ago. This deck used Cavalier of Flames and Cavalier of Gales, in together with the mana-efficient Fires of Intervention to put out heavy beaters with haste and flying to decimate your opponent. Why wasn't this deck called Jeskai Elementals? Because the main theme of the deck was any heavy beater, and the value came from Fires of Intervention more than any other card. It hints that the deck is just fine not running elementals at all. Is that a bold claim? Probably, but without the word elemental mattering in the deck, it doesn't make sense to credit them for the W. Upon writing this out, we're only a couple weeks into 2 sets out from Min20, and already we can see the metagame and top 10 lists that elementals are dropping off of top tier. This is the downside to certain packages. If a package is too focused, it loses relevance as new, more open packages come out. A good example of this is Adventures. Put together, Adventures have a more lasting effect and constructed than a tribal package like Elementals, because each individual card can be weighed for its effectiveness in any deck, and be included in their own adventure's rules deck. While Yarok can see play in various things, Omnath and Risen Reef aren't nearly as good without the other elementals to back them up. Because of that, the lack of elementals in Eldraine and Theros made it more likely that things would stray away from that format. It's not completely dead, certainly, and the benefits of having good elementals for an Eternal format deck later is wonderful. But unless Ikoria has a fair amount of playable elementals or something that strengthens the current way we play elementals, this deck is likely to starve out before standard rotation. This is all according to Wizards' plans, and should be enjoyed for what it gave us at the time, as well as the potential for future beats. But anyway, that's what I think. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you think we should throw in more jokes? Do you think we should lean more into the knowledge portion of this? Every comment you make will determine the way that I set up things in the future. So please engage in the comments below. And thank you once again to my friend from the internet who gave me the idea for this topic. I'm really glad that you reached out and told me what you wanted to hear. In the meantime, it's been a while, and apparently I need to shave. I've been dishing everybody out of the pool. I say, hey, what's going on? And I say, hey, 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 I say, hey, what's going on?